Somewhere in the dust-choked middle of nowhere, there was a town too stubborn to die. Folks called it Misstep Creek, 'cause every step you took here felt like a mistake. The sun was a vengeful god frying brains, and the sheriff was too drunk to remember his own name. Enter Slim McStumble, a cowboy whose only talent was accidentally starting bar fights. Slim swaggered into the saloon, his boots scuffed from kicking sense into himself earlier that morning. He tipped his hat to a mirror, thinking it was a pretty lady. Realized his mistake when the reflection didn't wink back. "Whiskey," he slurred to the bartender, a man so old he looked like he was held together by spite and sawdust. Slim took a sip, choked, and spat it back into his glass. "Thought I ordered whiskey, not wood varnish." In the corner, Rita Redshot, known for shooting her ex-husband's new wife right in the ego, leaned back, unimpressed. "You drink like a wounded coyote," she hissed. Slim tried to think of a comeback, but all that came out was a long, confused burp. Slim McStumble, now slightly more sober, but not enough to function, found himself outside, facing One-Eyed Pete, the most notorious bandit in Misstep Creek. Except Pete wasn't challenging Slim. No, Pete was just trying to pet a stray cat when Slim stumbled out and accused him of being too dang symmetrical for a one-eyed guy. Pete squinted with his good eye. "You calling me a liar, you tipsy tumbleweed?" Slim thought about it, tried to remember how insults worked, and ended up calling Pete a one-eyed horse impersonator. Naturally, this meant pistols at high noon. Except it wasn't noon, it was midnight, and neither of them had guns. Just finger pistols and a lot of poor decisions. Rita Redshot just leaned against the saloon door, shaking her head. "Boys, you're dueling over imaginary insults with invisible guns. Congratulations, you've outdumbed the cactus." Next morning, Slim McStumble woke up face down in a horse trough, soaking wet and smelling like his life choices. One-Eyed Pete was passed out beside him, his finger still shaped like a gun. The townsfolk just stepped over them on their way to the general store. Slim sat up, water dripping from his hat like a leaky roof, and glanced at the town square. A giant, hand-painted sign read, "Duel of Idiots Last Night, 5C Admission." Apparently the whole town had watched. Rita Redshot, now chewing on a piece of jerky, just grinned at him. "You've been promoted from village idiot to town legend," she snorted. Slim squinted at her. "Did I at least win?" She laughed. "Honey, nobody wins when you're involved." Slim staggered to his feet, shaking off the water like a soaked, half-dead coyote. One-Eyed Pete groaned from the ground, finally lowering his finger gun. "Reckon I shot you good last night," Pete mumbled. Slim just squinted at him. "If I'm dead, it sure feels a lot like every other miserable morning." Rita sauntered over, flicking her jerky at Slim's chest. "You boys planning on dueling the sun next? Or maybe your own stupidity?" Slim considered it, then decided against it because thinking hurt too much. "I ain't scared of the sun," he muttered, glaring at it like it was personally responsible for his headache. Just then, the sheriff finally woke up, still sitting outside the saloon where he'd passed out the night before. He pointed at Slim with a shaking hand. "Drunk again, McStumble?" Slim grinned, pulling his hat down to hide from reality. "No, Sheriff, just a professional idiot. Big difference." After an hour of squinting at the sun like it owed him money, Slim finally managed to stumble into the general store. The shopkeeper, Old Man Gristle, eyed him with a mixture of pity and disdain. "You gonna buy something or just sweat on my floor?" Slim slapped a coin on the counter. "Give me something strong enough to erase yesterday." Old Man Gristle handed him a jar of something that looked suspiciously like engine grease. "This here's for greasing wagon wheels, but it'll sure clean your insides too." Just as Slim prepared to test his life choices again, a woman burst in, frantically pointing outside. "Bandits! They're coming to rob the saloon!" Slim looked at his jar, then at the terrified woman. He knew this was his moment, his one chance to be more than just the town fool. Stepping outside, he puffed out his chest like a rooster who didn't realize he was breakfast. Y'all bandits best go home. This town's protected by Slim McStumble, hero of... A gunshot rang out, and Slim immediately dropped to the ground, pretending he'd been hit. From the saloon door, Rita shouted, "You ain't shot, idiot! You just tripped over your own feet!" Just as the bandits approached, Slim, still lying face down in the dirt, decided it was time to play dead. Maybe if he stayed motionless enough, life would just give up on him. One-eyed Pete stumbled out of the store holding the engine grease, squinting at the bandits like they were a mirage. "Y'all look uglier than Slim's reflection," he grumbled. Rita, still unimpressed, finally took matters into her own hands. She pulled out her revolver, fired a single shot into the air, and watched as the bandits scattered like scared chickens. "Guess they weren't ready for a competent threat," she muttered. Slim finally dared to peek up from the ground. "Did I scare them off?" Rita smirked. "Sure, you and your puddle of dignity." The sheriff finally wobbled over, squinting at the dust cloud left by the fleeing bandits. "Good job, Slim. Saved the town again." Slim grinned, dusting himself off. "Yup, just another day in the life of a hero." Rita just rolled her eyes. "Sure, hero. Whatever lets you sleep at night." Word spread fast in Misstep Creek that Slim McStumble had saved the town from bandits, mostly because no one else was willing to take credit for such a messy victory. The townsfolk put together a makeshift celebration, mostly involving leftover whiskey and questionable meat pies. Slim, now walking with a swagger that looked more like a limp, accepted a dusty medal from the mayor, a rusty bottle cap on a string. Rita just shook her head, muttering, "Hero of dumb luck." One-eyed Pete, now mostly sober, gave Slim a pat on the back. "You're a legend, you dumb sack of tumbleweed." Slim grinned, proudly wearing his bottle cap medal. "Reckon they'll sing songs about me," Rita snorted. "Yeah, songs about how not to handle bandits or basic coordination." The sheriff raised his bottle of something questionable. "To Slim, the man who can scare bandits just by existing." The crowd cheered, mostly out of boredom. Slim raised his own bottle, took a swig, and immediately choked on it, spilling half down his shirt. The celebration continued anyway, because in Misstep Creek, any victory was worth toasting, no matter how pathetic. By midday, Slim had finally made it off the roof, mostly by rolling off and landing in a heap. The townsfolk, now used to his antics, didn't even bother to check if he was alive. Rita just raised an eyebrow. "You still drunk, or just naturally that graceful?" Slim dusted himself off, straightened his bottle cap medal, and tried to walk with some semblance of dignity. It lasted 3 steps before he tripped over his own spurs. One-eyed Pete, now semi-conscious and chewing on something questionable, looked up from his barrel. "Hero of Misstep Creek, huh? They ought to put up a statue of you fallen on your face." Slim didn't bother arguing. Truth be told, he'd seen scarier things than bandits, mostly his own reflection after a night like the last one. The sheriff came hobbling over, offering Slim a flask. "Take a swig, champ. You've earned it." Slim took a sip and immediately regretted it. "That's turpentine." The sheriff just shrugged. "Keeps the snakes away." Rita couldn't help but smirk. "Too bad it doesn't keep idiots away." Slim just nodded solemnly. "Nothing does." As the sun dipped low, Slim sat on the porch of the saloon, holding his crooked bottle cap medal with pride. Rita leaned against the post beside him, still sipping on her never-ending cup of coffee. One-eyed Pete was half asleep in his barrel, muttering something about rattlesnakes playing poker. The sheriff, slightly more sober than usual, shuffled over. "You know, Slim, folks around here actually think you're a hero now." Slim just shrugged. "Guess sometimes being too dumb to die counts for something." Rita snorted. "You're living proof that luck and stupidity are sometimes the same thing." A few townsfolk passed by, giving Slim nods of respect, or maybe just acknowledging that he was still alive. Either way, Slim took it as a win. One-eyed Pete raised his hand from the barrel, giving a lazy salute. Long live the hero of Misstep Creek, he slurred before passing out again. Slim looked over at Rita. Think I'll ever do anything brave on purpose? Rita just smirked. Not likely, but at least you make failure look entertaining. As night fell, Slim leaned back, tipping his hat over his eyes, content to be the accidental legend of the most chaotic town in the West.